Welcome to the LightTwist Show, where we spotlight the most exciting builders and creators in virtual production, computer vision, and spatial computing. We talk about the past, present, and predictions for the future. I'm Vikas Reddy, founder of LightTwist.
And I'm Phil Nelson, the co-host with the co-most, the second banana who is second to none, your plus one and only. Thank you so much for joining us on this, our very first episode. It is gonna be a doozy.
All right, well, it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Powers for the first LightTwist Show as our guest. He's my friend of over 15 years. We started Occipital together, and he's now running Arcturus Industries, which is working on some amazing perception tech with Valve as one of their first customers. Jeff, do you want to give a quick intro of Arcturus?
Thanks, Vikas. I'm excited to be on show number 1. Hopefully I'll be back for some other shows in the near future. Arcturus is working on 3D vision tech that is basically powering virtual reality and augmented reality devices. So all the computer vision software that you need to make those things work, all the camera processing, things like head tracking, controller tracking, scene understanding, all the things you need to do to make a VR device tick. So that's what we do. And I'm excited to be here to talk about that, as well as talk about LightTwist and everything else going on.
Awesome. Well, excited to have you. And so at the show here, one of the things that we're doing is asking 10 rapid fire questions to just get a quick view of our guests. And so let's start there. So Jeff, first off, what's in your pocket?
Nothing, sadly.
All right, what's the last TV show or movie you watched?
Westworld, of course.
If you were a cyborg, what is your optimal human to machine ratio?
85% machine.
All right, invisibility or power of flight?
Flight, clearly.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No, get out of here.
Controversial opinion here, folks.
All right, so this is an important check that we do at the LightTwist Show. So just to confirm 100% you're not a replicant, you're in a desert, walking in the sand, when all of a sudden you look down and see a tortoise. It's crawling toward you. You reach down and flip the tortoise on its back, Jeff. The tortoise lays on its back, its belly baking in the hot sun, beating its legs, turning over itself over. But it can't, not without your help. But you're not helping. Why is that, Jeff?
Why am I not helping?
Okay, inconclusive. Might be a replicant. Okay, we'll move on.
Voight-Kampff test inconclusive on that one.
All right, what's your favorite computer ever?
That's a good question.
Wow. Favorite computer ever? Let's start with whatever I played the 3D FX Voodoo graphics on, which was, I think, in a Sound Blaster. But that was,
yeah,
those were the days.
All right. So what was your first job?
Housing IT office tech at the University of Michigan.
Was that helping like students with how to computer?
Yes, and like administrative people with how to computer. Like, I was like basically trying to speed up this Visual Basic script. I think it's Visual Basic that basically installed everything on the computers. So we basically had this massive script. It was kind of like way before Docker,
So you could just provision these machines with a shell script essentially.
Nice.
Yes.
That's awesome.
A VB script. I sped it up because there were so many sleeps in there. I just deleted those.
All right, so this one's a tricky one. So you're stuck on a desert island. I actually spelled it dessert here, so it could be an island made of sand or a dessert. All right, so you get one book, one video game, and one album. What are they?
Book, a video game, and an album. Book would probably be like How to Survive on a Deserted Island. I don't know exactly which book.
Smart. Smart.
Video game would probably be like, what's the survival game that we played back in the 90s? Like the one where you go out
Oregon
west.
Trail?
Yes.
Oregon.
I think Oregon Trail would have a lot of lessons. So what was the third one? I get a book, I get a video game, and I get something else?
An album, a music album.
An album. Well, I know like no music except for like Weezer, so I guess I'd go with Weezer though.
All right, so we got, all right, and then last question, go to Karaoke Song, which may be perhaps part of that album.
Karaoke Song.
Yeah, I think the last time we did karaoke together, it was "Say It Ain't So," another Weezer song.
Yeah. Why am I so bad at remembering names of songs?
I mean, I did sing Sexual Healing once. I like to say it was just like, Marvin Gaye incarnate, but my wife might have a different opinion there.
Maybe Hot in Here by Nelly. Let's do that one.
All right. Yeah. Good answer.
Nice. All right. Well, that was the 10 rapid fire questions. So we're going to move on to story
Semi-rapid fire.
Semi-rapid fire. Semi-rapid. We'll fix it in post.
They didn't.
So this is our latest prototype. This is a prime sense heatsink, but this is actually our board. So this is completely custom board that we built we're now in the process of actually shrinking it to be smaller, but it has all the features that we were talking about.
So that's our prototype board.
So that's what you're seeing.
That's the prime sense shit like that. Here's actually another.
That's our first board.
That's our first prototype actually. You can see the trend, right?
Smaller.
It's getting smaller. So
Yeah.
in fact, this one had the 30-pin connector on it. So.
Yeah. There's another fortuitous event is that they switched the lightning connector in time for us to switch to that too.
And you can see this one has a battery.
Yeah.
This is actually not the same battery we'll be using.
Yeah, it would the fat one, right?
Well, we're actually using a cylindrical. Oh, yeah. Turns out we were able to get more capacity.
I think the battery's probably going to be something closer to this.
Yeah,
a little bigger.
A little bit fatter and a little bit longer. Yeah. That's a 34 length and 18 diameter.
So the system has no buttons, no on switch. It's just plug it. You just plug it in. And let me launch this application. Depth.
Yeah.
It's actually and we can actually as well. So
You actually get 30 frames per second.
oh yeah, this is fast. This is 30. Yeah. Which is only now possible over the IAP2 protocol with the lightning connector. They changed the protocols, and we were able to rewrite our drivers and firmware to work with it.
Oh. I'm afraid of.
It's actually one of its kind. Don't drop it.
Can you get your hand closer and closer?
Oh, okay.
This one doesn't have this is the range still from back.
Yeah, it might be the depth isn't calibrated to the right thing because we actually have a different baseline than the standard.
Yeah, the camera is the same as the picture.
Your head is a reference image.
Yeah.
So should go to the donation with that. Damn, that's for real.
We're actually making PCBs to put into the small chassis right now. So if you guys were here maybe like in 2 weeks, we would have it in the small chassis. Yep. Maybe a month. I don't know. Yeah. It depends how fast we can CNC.
So do you think we can get 30 FPS color image plus 30 FPS?
Oh yes, we actually have a stream recorder right now that actually records data of it's synchronized RGB, depth, IR, gyro, accelerometer.
Oh, gyro too.
Yeah, because from the iPad, right? So we have that information and the accelerometer.
Synchronized.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cool thing for scanning rooms at least.
That's just
That would
It's
be
very
separate.
helpful. Yeah, it helps you to identify certain
Yeah.
planes.
Exactly. Avoid all these issues when you are just looking at flat plane.
Right. So
That's
so
really simple.
yeah. So tracking falling back on the sensors. Even if you don't fold the data into the model because you're not confident in it, you can still keep a consistent tracking pattern.
If you do real 360, then you can.
Oh yeah, we could do a 3D model.
You can. Yeah.
That would be simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would actually
You
be.
don't get totally lost doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Guys.
Oh yeah, you can.
Oh yeah, that's.
Two-finger touch. Distances.
No more ruler.
Here.
Yeah.
With
yeah.
my arms.
Gotta go back for
Stand further back. Yeah.
Careful.
We need more of a midget.
No, I need to go further.
There you go.
1.8 meters. Something
So
like
that's
that.
about that. I'm like 176.
Okay.
That's not calibrated.
Can't really see. We need to put it back on.
Yeah.
So that's VGA?
This is VGA.
Yeah.
This is probably VGA. Yeah, this is VGA.
So structure sensor was this 3D sensor that we built at Occipital that fit on the iPad. It was paired with a really powerful 3D scanning SDK and enabled hundreds of apps to be built on top of it for things like orthotics, prosthetics, even plastic surgery. Still to this day, if you go to a orthotics conference, there's like tons of apps built around this platform, which is pretty awesome. But how it got started is probably one of the craziest stories that we probably haven't really told many of the twists and turns that it took to bring that product to market, and generated probably 50-60 million in revenue over several years. And so I thought I'd start there. So Jeff, do you want to talk about the early days when we were doing some Connect hacking there?
Yeah. So even before anything, serious with the Connect and structure sensor, we were trying to build an augmented reality platform. Like, this was before ARKit, AR4, any of that stuff. And I remember we were working on, processing imagery from the iPhone and iPad and trying to do augmented reality, basically. But it was really tough. Like, the processing power was way less than it is today. The image quality was quite a lot worse, especially indoors. If you're doing anything indoors, the lighting it was just really blurry. And so I remember we were thinking, like, I remember we built a couple things. Like, we built a game that was like, I think we put the letter A in augmented reality, like floating on some, on a plane. Basically, we tried to find a plane. And I also remember,
That's right.
I can't remember the chronology. Do you remember the cockroach?
Oh, we made
game
the.
that we made?
Yeah, you're right. We made there was the cockroach game. Do you remember is that what you're talking about? We made that sixed off, tracked, but on a plane. We'll have to find some of this in post production here for this video. But the cockroach was it was on a planar surface, I think, right?
Yeah, there were cockroaches climbing or something, and because we were finding a plane, and so then there were going to be cockroaches on the plane or something. So
That's right.
Yeah, so we were doing that whole thing, and we were just getting concerned about how there wasn't a whole lot of compute available, and it was also kind of still a little bit unclear and fuzzy how we were going to make money. And so we were also playing with the Kinect, and we had a Windows computer with NVIDIA graphics card at the time. I don't know, I don't remember which version it was, 1060 or no, right, way before that, 940, whatever the numbers were, 640, I don't know. So we had a graphics card, and we were playing with the Kinect. I think maybe actually at some point had the real Kinect, and then we may have graduated to the Asus Action Pro sensors, and we were using software in particular, Scanect from the Man TTL guys that we ended up acquiring and became part of Occipital. But we were playing with that, and we saw what was possible in terms of 3D scanning. And then we also saw how difficult it was going to be just using the built-in camera so that's kind of when we came up with the idea. And I remember sketching it out about how we could basically take the guts of a Kinect and put it onto the back of an iPhone. And thinking about that sketch and how small everything was, and then where we ended up going to, which was still fairly small, but like way bigger than that sketch. But yeah, that's kind of the way it started. And I remember, I called you and we brainstormed. And then,
I remember.
And then it was a difficult road to convince, our support, our backers, our investors that we should actually build that.
Yeah. I remember I think we tried to do some like art. We hacked together there was like PCL, like open source thing that we like just tried hacking together. And like, I remember there being like 4,000 dependencies that you had to install, and it took us like a whole day, like even just to run it. Which was, I mean, it was still amazing that it even, the fact that you could like scan 3D from like consumer grade hardware, even though it was like a little janky, was still pretty amazing. But and I remember like how long the delay was between like when because I remember prototyping that in your apartment. Like we were like, okay, let's get this running and see what it looks like on like some weekend. And then at some point, you called me. I mean, unless it was maybe the same weekend or like, I don't know when, but being like, hey, maybe we should do this. And like, I forget, I don't even remember the content of that conversation, except I remember going from, this is insane, like, what the hell, Jeff, to like, in like being at the end being like, oh, okay, this actually could work. Like, and I probably would have said, honestly, fuck no, if I knew all of the work that we had to go through and the craziness. So maybe it was good that
it only took Apple 8 years to release their own API for it. So.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So maybe that was pretty crazy. I remember like I agree. I think I remember it being like pretty tough to. I remember we wrote up this like long story of like how things would progress, and it was actually pretty reasonably accurate, except for like we were way off on. I think we predicted, interestingly, as part of that, we predicted that 3D sensors would get integrated into mobile devices, but we were early. Our prediction was like too early by like 5 years or something, like 4 years maybe. And so I think the original thinking was, I think our original thinking was we build one generation of like iOS specific hardware and then like switch into like more generalized or like multi-platform hardware down the road, because we were like, oh, it'll get built in. But it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, we were going to focus like more on software, and then we also had some ideas of like other types of hardware we could build, like even like glasses and things like that.
I've got a visual aid here. I don't know if it's going to pay. There we go.
You just got to put it in front of yourself.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Yes, indeed.
We eventually did make glasses, and they were like mixed reality glasses, which Apple's rumored to be working on now. So basically, everything we do, Apple copies us 5 to 10 years later.
Yeah. Just with billions of more dollars of budget, I guess. Yeah.
we give them the roadmap, and they supply the billions of dollars to do it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. They could just given us $100 million, and that would have been better for them.
If you're listening, we'll give you some more roadmap items for a cool $100 million.
Yeah, exactly. Just a couple $100 million each, and we're good. We're good to go.
I mean, it's a steal, honestly.
Yeah. But I remember like I think like after convincing the board that we should do it, I think there was we like got hooked up to. I remember for a while we got hooked up with PrimeSense because they were the only ones that had this early tech. I think we also were talking to PMD Tech with like that had like a time of flight sensor tech. That was pretty. Pretty state of the art at the time, but like, I think we brought up like a 3D scanning stack on both, if I recall. Like, I think it was like we tried both just to see.
I don't think we got that far with PMD. I don't think we got the full. Maybe we did basic scanning tests. Maybe we exported some data. I can't remember. I don't think it was live. Although you might be right. I remember we did some really interesting stuff. Like we basically took a Asus Action Pro and we like somehow got it to communicate to the iPad, and I can't remember if it was a jailbroken iPad or how we did that. I remember we actually got it to stream basically as is.
That's right. I think you, I recall I think it was two things. It was a jailbroken iPad, and we just used, I think, like lower level, might have been IOKit or Device Kit, or I don't know what it was called.
Yeah, we used IOKit, I think.
Yeah. And then you hacked the...
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think you hacked the, you had to hack the PrimeSense firmware, if I recall, to like change like one of the things. Like, I forget what it was. It was Device ID or... Oh, no, it might have been the power, actually. The power requirement.
Could have been
there was something.
Oh yeah, may have modified it to say that it was going to take less power.
Yes, because that way the app. Oh yeah, report that it would take less power, so that Apple would like allow it to connect or something. Yeah, I remember it was something crazy like that.
So you had to trick it. You had to trick the computer essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And the other, I remember the other crazy
that's
thing
amazing
we got.
That worked. Yeah.
And then I remember we had it where. The first actual live scan, I think, was you were in your SF, like it was our SF like office / your apartment, and then it streamed over I think because it was no chance it was going to run on device, we like streamed it, and then because we were streaming it over the web, we're like, oh, we may as well pipe it over, and then me and Forrest were in Forrest, one of our like early employees, is like a college dropout, like. Super interesting character, awesome guy. So him and I were in Boulder,
a Toastmaster, among other things.
Yeah, that's right. And we,
Hi, Forrest, if you see this.
And then we received the stream over, and I remember it was like a bathroom, it was like the toilet or something that we were like reconstructing. I don't know if that was the exact first one, but it was at least like one of the first. It might have been like the earliest. That actually legit might have been the first remote 3D scan ever, maybe.
One
I don't know if there's anyone else that's done that.
We streamed the depth data to the computer, which was running essentially like a CUDA based reconstruction. What's the name of the algorithm? I can't remember, but
it was doing like
a TSDF fusion.
TSDF,
I forget.
Yeah.
So we're doing like this
exactly.
TSDF fusion, and we then had basically software that was looping over the TSDF and figuring out all the changes, and then it would send the changes to the client. And so, like you're saying, the client could be on the tablet itself, but it could also be halfway around the world. So we sent like you said, we sent the changes.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that there was like a client updater too. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And yeah, it all worked in it. And I think I remember, and then the whole process of like convincing PrimeSense to work with us when we were like, and we had a track record because we, Red Laser got acquired, so we could at least name drop that. But convincing PrimeSense to work with us when we were like, it must have been like 8 people at the time or 7 people, like before we actually got started on it. But yeah, that was the crazy.
They were just worried about how much support they'd have to provide, and so we had to like basically figure out everything on our own to avoid them being too concerned that we were going to be a support burden. So it was like, let's reverse engineer everything so we don't have to ask like any questions.
Well, and I still remember to you probably at the time, like what would eventually happen like a year later. It was them being acquired by Apple.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like pretty. Like there was like a bunch of crazy stuff like that. There was like the early trip, like there was like one trip we went on to like cement the, like basically like finalize the deal, and it was like this like I still feel really bad about this one, but yeah, there's like 4 of us that were slated to go to Israel to like two of our engineers. Jean-Amir and Forrest. This was would have been 2013, probably earlier 2013 maybe, or maybe late 2012. I think it was probably early 2013 actually, and then we, so there's 4 of us slated to go. So like I was in so basically like, and it basically ended up being where Jeff was the only one that made it on time, and like the only one that had a good excuse was Jean-Amir, because he he's a Turkish citizen, and he Israel like was okay with him going, but then the airline for whatever reason was like, oh, your passport's not long enough, and so they held him up. Forrest, I think, just like was at the Occipital office and just like didn't get on the bus because he was like working on something in the morning before the flight, and then decided to like take the next bus instead of a cab for some reason. And then mine was like the worst excuse because I stupidly hadn't looked at my passport and was at a friend's wedding in Milwaukee, got like super drunk. It was a Russian Jewish wedding, so tons of vodka. Woke up in the morning with a huge hangover, and then like for some reason I looked at the expiration date of my passport. I don't even know why. I was just like, oh yeah, let me just look at this, and it was like expired, and I was like, oh my god, and ended up having to like reroute my flight through Detroit. Figured out how to get a passport in one day, like, and then thankfully made it like one day later. But I felt so bad. Like, Jeff, so what was it like because you had to go there and you were like in a room with like 30 Israelis probably.
Yeah, these big Israelis. Their lawyer, his name I think was Nimrod, and I mean he was a nice guy, but he was pretty intimidating. And he's like, "Sign the contract now," So I'm like, he's like getting these last minute concessions from me because I'm all alone, defenseless.
Yeah, no.
But
I was like,
yeah. That's amazing that you guys actually made it the next day. Like that's just shocking.
We got the deal signed. I remember, we made a couple, I think like at least one or two more Israel trips, and like did a whole bunch of like back and forth to like dial in the sensor and all the things that were required. And I think the crazy thing is like we were on the Occipital retreat where we were actually planning out like our long strategy, Kickstarter campaign, and everything. I think like right before then, Apple had acquired PrimeSense. So like, yeah, Jeff, you want to talk about some of the craziness around that?
Yeah, so we got word that they were acquiring PrimeSense before it was public, and we spent a couple months, I think, not knowing really what that meant for us. Like, were we dead? Like, were we not going to be able to produce hardware at all based on those components? Were we, was it going to be fine? Like, we didn't really know. And I think, to be honest, like, those weeks and months were, I think, maybe the most stressful time I can recall in running a company. Like, I remember I was like, I kind of came up with this like coping strategy of reading blogs on like particle physics and things like that every night because I just had to get my mind off of what was going on. And like, that, by the way, that doesn't mean I learned anything about particle physics, but it was so out there that it would totally take my mind off of this stuff. And it was just super intense because like, you didn't want to freak the team out and be like, hey guys, I know you've been working on this for 12 or 18 months, but we're not going to be able to produce anything. You didn't want to lie to him either. So it was just really intense. And we didn't know if we were going to be able to buy anything or not. And in the end, they kind of said, yeah, you can buy some stuff once and, give us an order now, pay us up front. If we don't deliver it, too bad. And we were just like, whew. And but we got our stuff, and we were lucky that we got as far along as we did before that happened, because we were basically on our own, right? We pretty much had to produce more or less just buying chips. And fortunately, we were probably, if that were 6 months earlier, we probably wouldn't have been.
Yeah, it would have been screwed. Yeah, no way we could have. Yeah, I remember like that decision was super hard. Like how many chips we it's like this, like this happens a lot in hardware, pretty often. But in this case, it was like Apple doing it in a pretty ruthless fashion. And I guess they could have been even more horrible and just been like, you're done, and cut us off. But thankfully, they at least were like, fine, you can place one last order for the next like X years and put up like millions of dollars basically of inventory, of cash for inventory. And so that was like,
well, the least they could have done was nothing.
Yeah.
So they decided to go one better.
I remember that was like
But you
Yeah,
were
just,
you
like,
were
deciding-
you were just saying, Vikas, I thought this is interesting. You were just saying about how this happens a lot in hardware, and you really have to gauge like how much money can you afford as a company, how much can you afford to expend on this right now, versus how many of these are we actually going to sell, and what if we don't sell them all? You know, like then what happens?
Yeah, it was tough because I think like
we faced a lot of it, and I'm sorry to interject, but we faced like the exact same lessons that everybody just learned over the last 2 years.
Yeah, with
years
the supply chain hurricane.
Like,
yeah,
we were just like, we were paranoid about our supply chain, and so we were like, how do we buy all the long lead items early, and all this stuff. And the whole rest of the world kind of generally works on this, like place the orders up front, and then and then everything just kind of works its way through the supply chain. It's like place all your orders up front and then just wait until it goes through. And so people didn't order as much up front and stuff like that. And I think people have learned more recently that you should be more nimble and like order as many of the cheap, smaller things up front and have them in stock, and like to sort of be ready to weather a situation where like, oh, you can't get this one tiny chip that's not that important. Sorry, you can't make your entire car.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happened over the last
that's
couple
what's
years.
been happening. Yeah, those crazy stories of this item used to have a 1 month lead time and now it's 3 years.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of that stuff now.
I mean, that was one of the crazier lessons, and like we actually, I think mostly because we were like, just like insanely spending crap loads of our brain power on it, but like, yeah, the problem with like supply chain stuff, it's like it's not like software where you're like, oh, we forgot that one detail in our web stack. Let's go like crunch on it and like crank it out over a weekend. It's like, oh, you forgot to order that one capacitor like 6 months ago. You're screwed now. Like, it's like
now nobody can do anything until we get it.
Yeah, it's like, and weirdly, some of the passive components are the longest lead. So it's like, it's sort of like the for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost type situation.
Yeah.
And I remember like thankfully like got through that, and then the Kickstarter campaign was like the other part that was like still like, I think the hardest part there was like, I remember like just even you and I, Jeff, spending like insane amounts of time on the script of like, what language do we use to like explain what the hell this thing is? I guess it'd be considered product marketing, but I mean, I don't know if you remember some of the things that we had to like struggle through there. Like, that was tough.
And that video, if it was, did Glass and Marker produce that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
First video.
Yeah, and they did a good job. I mean, we but it was a lot. It was a lot of gyrations on the script, and I remember we went to one of our first ever company retreats, and we were shooting like our own footage there, basically to try to tell the story. Because once you have the film production company involved, like they don't want you to be reshooting like 30 times. They're just kind of like, shoot it once or twice, we'll fix it in post. And we're just like, no, we need to get it right. And so we would just practice it over and over and over again. And you do like you kind of like, I don't remember all the different variants that we tried, but you do kind of get a feel over time as to whether you're getting the point across. But it's tough.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's tough.
Kudos to people that can like do that on the first try, but like for us, we tried it so many times.
I remember actually one of the crazier things we did was Jeff and I spent a ton of time like deconstructing other Kickstarter campaigns. So the Oculus campaign, there's Pebble, there's at least like 3 or 4 others that we like looked to for inspiration.
What was the biggest one at the time? Like, what was the?
I mean, Oculus was pretty. Oculus and Pebble, I think, were the 2 biggest ones that we like looked at that were pretty recent. And then I remember like we like got to this place where we like could predict. Like we played this game where it was like, I don't even know why we did this exactly, but it was kind of funny. It would like I'd like send Jeff a Kickstarter video without the campaign page and be like, how much do you think this raised? And like we were pretty freaking good at it. Like within like probably like 20% or 30%. Like it was like this weird. I don't even know how we trained our brains on that, but then that was crazy.
I remember some of the tricks were like, is it like how much broad appeal is there? That was a key one. How expensive is it? Like that'll give you a sense. And then like also like, is it even clear like what the product does? Because so many campaign were just not clear, like really what it does or what you're going to get. And so we tried in our video to be like, I mean, we weren't that broad appeal, but we tried to make it as broad as we could. And then, you know, we had this section where like, here's what you get. Like we just made sure to make that clear, because so many videos I watched it and I'm like, okay, what am I backing? What am I going to get again? I don't get it. And so if that's not clear, like people aren't going to spend money.
Yeah. Well, and then if they do, you're also setting yourself up for a whole lot of hurt later on when they're asking like, why didn't I get this thing that's in the video? Or do I get this thing? People, I think a lot of companies kind of skimp on the upfront storytelling there and being specific, because they don't realize that it's going to take a chunk out of their ass later if they don't.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember like we did the first cut with like Glass and Marker, and like they actually did they did a good job with like the source material, but I remember like watching it, I knew, I don't know, I like had like a physical reaction where I was like, I want to throw up in my mouth, because
like
it wasn't that it was a bad video, it just wasn't, it was like knowing all the work that like we all put into it, like I was like, this video is not, it's like, didn't want to fail at the last like 1 mile, you know, out of like 100-mile race and be like, that first video, like I was like, this is not going to work. I mean, you never know though. Like maybe it would have been good, but I don't know. Did you have that same reaction, Jeff, with that first one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they were. I don't remember it now. It'd be awesome to go back and see if we have those somewhere. Because those were super.
We gotta find that and then try to insert that one of those here. Talk about an artifact, huh?
Yeah, that'd be good for sure. And then the other thing I remember is, do you remember when we? So like the other thing is like the other thing that we did was like get endorsements, and like I think we like, I don't even know if this is a good idea, but like we kind of like somewhat ambushed a bunch of different people to like do, like basically we were like we'd be like, hey,
accosted would be the phrase I use. You accosted.
Like I think it was like there was like it was like Daniel Suarez, who's like an awesome sci-fi writer, Tim O'Reilly, and then other people I think were like we already knew, but like those two, I think we were like, hey, are you up for doing like a quick like thing? And then they're like yes, and then be like, cool, we've got all the equipment ready to go literally right now.
And Suarez ended up giving it. Was it Suarez that had the big lead-off quote for the video? I mean, I think that honestly was probably worth its weight in gold, just that one sentence. What you're talking was it giving superpowers to average Joe devices. See, I still remember.
Yeah, and he was also like, what you see in science fiction is very quickly becoming possible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Nailed it.
I think my favorite quote was like the guy, what was his name? From Prime Sense, where it just sounded like, for whatever reason, even though he said a very immense challenge, it sounded like a very man's challenge.
I still think about that all the time, dude. Every time somebody says the word immense, I think man's. It's a very man's challenge. Yeah,
which I mean is, you know, I guess man or woman, but it was a very big challenge. But those fun days. But the campaign was pretty crazy. I still don't remember. I think still to this day, like there's still like chunks of 2013 where like people are like, oh, remember that thing happened? And it was like during, like I was like, I don't remember that. Like no one ever told me about whatever that was. And then I was like, oh, it was in 2013. Okay, yeah, I didn't know anything that happened outside of what we were working on, basically.
Pretty tuned out on the general world at that time.
And the last crazy thing that happened right before, like during the Kickstarter campaign, was we were all flew into Boulder, and it was literally the 100-year flood in Boulder. So it's like basically a flood that happened, like a flood of a magnitude that hadn't been seen in 100 years, literally the week of our Kickstarter campaign, which I was like, if this doesn't kill me or us, like, then I don't know what's going to kill us, because this is crazy.
Yeah. I remember that one little bridge over there was that chunk of river that was like, it was underwater, like when we got there. I remember seeing that. I think that was the first time I'd been to Boulder.
It was a good welcome. But my apartment got flooded, I think. It was crazy. It was like, that was like a crazy time. But anyway, it was it kind of kicked off this whole, like, I think it was probably the first like really accessible 3D scanning platform, like tons of applications, like, and then and actually like real ones too. It wasn't just like sort of toy applications, but the medical stuff was really really interesting. Stuff that we never predicted, like orthotics, prosthetics, plastic surgery, like Doctors Without Borders using it for like people that had like lost limbs. Like that was actually one of the things I never knew about was this whole problem space of like it was
creating
hard to get a
comfortable
cast.
prostheses.
Yeah. So it's pretty awesome. But yeah, it was,
and
I think
most recently we saw a brand new use of it, which is perhaps my most favorite, which is Nathan Fielder used it on his new show, The Rehearsal.
I heard about that.
Surreptitiously scan someone's house in order to replicate the entire house for a rehearsal of the meeting with that person.
A rehearsal of the rehearsal, right? Because he hired an actor to also play the person.
We're gonna have to pull up that. Yeah, we'll pull that video in for the footage. But yeah, that was pretty crazy. Yeah, Anyway, that was still one of the craziest things. Like, yeah, I think, just the idea of even putting like we're gonna strap a laser powered device onto an Apple device and build a whole 3D scanning platform around it. Still to this day, arguably one of the craziest things that's been done in this whole field. So
well, and just thinking, how many different iPad brackets did we have to manufacture? Like there was probably 8.
So many.
Like, it was
every iPad was like,
more than 8.
Yeah, the same as before, but we're going to move the camera by 1/2 millimeter. So frustrating.
Yeah.
Or sync it by 1/2 millimeter, or raise it by 1/2 millimeter.
Shout out to Jason Huang there, who managed a lot of that for us, and
Agent
we hired.
Wong.
We still probably if anyone was giving us advice, it'd be like, you should never hire a kid straight out of school to manage your whole supply chain with Foxconn and everything for like a new product. But yeah, that was still to this day one of the best hires like we ever made. Was just
seems like it worked out.
This kid, that was pretty awesome. Well, anyway, we'll move on from there. We're gonna go to some topical discussion.
So, Jeff, one of the things that's been in the news recently is that Meta released a price increase to the Quest. This is pretty rare these days for hardware to actually get more expensive. And so I was wondering first what you thought about that, and do you see this happening for anything else in the VR space, or do you think that we'll kind of get back to the old normal of prices actually slowly dropping instead of slowly raising?
Yeah, it's a super good question. The price raise of $100 on the Quest 2 it makes sense because it was being sold at a loss, essentially.
Very clearly being sold at a loss for what they were charging, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the reasons why that was done. I think part of it might be, I'll speculate, okay? Part of it could be just immense pressure through from the stock market and from on the Meta stock, just in terms of how much money is being lost in that area. Is metaverse really happening? Is it happening as fast as you say it's going to happen?
That $1 billion bet.
Exactly. More than that, like 10 billion. So then, so there's that. There's like, okay, maybe you should stop selling things at a loss. Another is like, it really stifles competition and amongst, in addition to having pressure from the market, you also have the potential for, regulatory oversight if you're cutting out all competition by selling at a loss. The other thing too is that there's, I think if there's any company that Meta is paying attention to, it's Apple, and they're concerned about, and they've released like videos showing off some of their work to sort of defend against, well, when Apple comes out with something, we'll at least look like we did something with all that money. And I think, alongside that, there's like pretty clear rumors now that the price of whatever Apple launches is going to be really expensive. And so I think the Meta, price point of like $300, $299 or whatever it was, is just going to seem ridiculously cheap compared to what's coming. And so I think part of it is they just realized, you know what, like it doesn't have to be this cheap. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's going to work out in terms of volume. But I think those factors all coming together. As far as other people, other players, I think it's going to be really hard for anybody to come in at those lower price points anytime soon. And also, we need to start showing the potential of what VR and eventually AR, but we need to show the potential of what VR can be. And when we're so hamstrung by price, it's really hard to do that. The parts just aren't that cheap. And I mean, the processors, the displays, the optics, all these things are not cheap. And so the idea of getting it out for $299 when you're routinely paying $1,000 for a phone is just kind of crazy. So yeah, I think the prices are going to creep up. I think you're going to see 500 to 1,000 being way more common, maybe more.
Yeah,
that
seems reasonable.
I'll be interested to see what the the thing that's one thing that's kind of interesting is, like, I think
here, let's pause there so I can cut it cleaner.
Oh yeah, sure.
Vikas, what about you?
I mean, the one interesting aspect of at least what Apple's doing that I think is interesting, I'd be curious about Jeff's thoughts, is it seems like, based on the rumors and everything else, like, I wonder if they're going to position it more as a monitor / computer, not replacement, but like sort of position, I guess, in some sense, like
instead of an accessory.
People do spend, spending $500 to $1,000 on a monitor is not unheard of. And
if you want a good one.
Yeah, or a TV, right? Like a really nice TV, it could be like, $1,000 to $2,000 or more if you're going crazy. And so I think it might be interesting if they try to position it as an alternate to those things, where it's like, this is going to be the best monitor you could ever buy, and it somehow is going to be paired with, you could imagine it paired with like productivity, and maybe serving, in that sense. And if you position it that way, then, spending $1,000 on it is not crazy, right? It's like, okay, that's, the $500 price point, or the $300 price point for Meta for hardware, I think was like, if you want to bootstrap it as its own new platform, and you need some kind of like network effect, or like, that's one strategy that I think probably might be what Meta was thinking, or Facebook rather, at the time, was like, we need to have our own platform that we own outright, given especially the recent $10 billion change from Apple around privacy stuff that like really hurt them. And so their long-term goal, I assume, is like Meta's long-term goal is like, we need to have our own platform that's totally separate. Whereas Apple can afford to say, this is just a super expensive, this just basically treated as a premium monitor. Like, they already sold how much were those like super nice monitors that they used to sell? Like
they still do.
They still do?
Yeah.
How much are those?
The Pro monitor is several $1,000s. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, for them, if they sold, if they positioned against that, they're like, well, you could buy the Pro monitor, or you could buy the $1,000 Apple thing, Apple.
Yeah, and I've got a decent amount of experience using virtual desktop with my Valve Index headset, and it's genuinely pretty compelling as a like work surface. It's just that I think none of the software is there for it in terms of boring business stuff. Like, I think somebody out there right now is probably working on a super dull spreadsheets but for VR app that's going to make them $10 billion. Like, they're going to make so much hand over fist money because nobody else is working on it because it seems boring, but the boring stuff is usually what makes the most money in the long run with computing hardware.
Jeff, what do you think? Like,
I think the display. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask about that. Yeah, I was going to ask your thoughts though.
I think the display angle is interesting. What I haven't heard a lot is a lot of rumors of specific applications that are about ready to launch. You just haven't heard a lot, and that makes me think that it's probably going to launch either it's got to launch as something relatively simplistic out of the gate, or it'll launch as a developer device out of the gate, and it might. Things that Apple does really well are displays, high dynamic range displays, the whole high dynamic range pipeline.
Super high refresh screens as well.
Yeah, and they'll have enough compute on there that they could push these basically at a higher resolution and dynamic range than anybody has so far for VR, which I think will make a bigger difference than people expect. I think when people put on a VR headset today, they don't really think about dynamic range. They don't really think about those contrast ratios and brightness levels and things like that. But I think Apple's going to force everybody to now start to think about that, because they'll show off how much of a difference it can make. If you're in a dark, cavernous VR scene, it'll actually feel like way different than if you're in like a bright outdoor scene. Like it'll cause this physiological response when the brightness is just like 100 times brighter when you're in that outdoor scene than if you're in that dim scene with still having decent dynamic range across both. So I think that's what they're going to do well. So that kind of fits reasonably well with it's a display idea. And I mean, for professionals, they can also be like, we get the color perfect because we totally control everything. Like we're not even letting stray light in. So, light from the scene, doesn't affect the appearance of things. And so if you're like doing some film type thing and you want to have essentially perfect color, that can be done in VR. So I think that's possible. They're supposedly also going to have a ton of cameras, and presumably we'll do things like reconstruct the scene around you and have all sorts of features like that. So I don't know. They're kind of an X factor, but everybody is definitely wondering what they're going to do and whether they're going to come in at the professional end or come down towards the consumer eventually too.
Yeah, and Apple has the luxury of being Apple essentially, and having an incredible, for lack of a better term, war chest that they can slow walk some of this stuff. Like I remember, Jeff, me and you went to WWDC, and like it was all about ARKit. That WWDC they were pushing it, but that was like 5 years ago, something like that, four or 5 years ago, and they're still kind of slow walking the AR stuff. They're just now finally really bringing out the holy shit AR apps from Apple. And it took them, 4 years after really pushing it at WWDC. And maybe some of that's due to the ongoing pandemic. Obviously, everything's kind of slowed down for that. But also, that's just kind of Apple's style, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, their style was different. With AR stuff, it was pretty different. Like usually they launch a feature that was more like, they add something to the camera, but it's so that they can do a new effect or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But with the
it's usually purpose-built kind of tech, or it seems purpose-built.
Yeah, purpose-built, yeah, exactly. Now you can take, these better photos, essentially. But with the AR stuff, I actually thought it was a little bit of a departure, in that they were kind of like, here it is, but there's not really much you can do with it yet. There's kind of a measuring app that's cool, I guess. And now they're just starting to launch some of that stuff. I think the reality is they wanted to do a lot more with it, but it wasn't beautiful enough. It didn't work well enough. This is really hard stuff, as we know, to develop. And so probably by the time they had it ready to launch, they were just like, most of these apps are not demo worthy. They don't look ready enough yet. So no, you can't launch them.
Yeah, it's actually a good seg into another topic here around like neural radiance fields, which are, to me, one of the most exciting new developments in computer vision and graphics and rendering. Maybe Jeff, do you want to give a quick intro of like what they are exactly?
Yeah, sure. So if you're familiar with 3D reconstruction, the traditional thing to do is to capture a bunch of images or otherwise, capture a scene and produce essentially a mesh, a bunch of polygons, or maybe a bunch of points. And neural radiance fields are different in that instead of that, they're basically allowing you to generate a viewpoint from any angle in any position within kind of a volume of where you capture the scene. And so the purpose of the NeRF field, or the NeRF, is to generate, do a view synthesis and give you a view from a certain angle, which also essentially means that you're capturing the object or the scene as well. And there are other ways you can break these NeRFs down to actually extract an individual object out, maybe generate a mesh. But the amazing thing and the big difference from what we had before and what we have with NeRF is we essentially get photorealism. We get a difference in appearance as we move around an object, look at it from a different angle. So if there's something that's glossy, it'll look reflective. You'll see the reflection moving. If you look at it from a steeper angle, it'll get brighter. So that's really the difference that you didn't have before. And NeRFs are still very nascent, but there's a ton of interest, a ton of research. And we're just at the beginning, I think, of what they're going to do to the field. And it is going to be, like, I'm not big on all the 3D technologies that come out, but NeRF I'm super excited about.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's been interesting to see like the explosion of even just like papers and CVPR and all these different conferences where there was that initial NeRF paper, and then there's probably been like 1,000 different papers since then, like and it wasn't even that. It was like maybe 20. I want to say it was like 2020 sometime.
I think it was 2020. And there were a ton more at 2022 for CVPR. There were quite a few NeRF or NeRF-like papers there. Yeah. Yeah,
and I wonder if part of the reason why there's a lot of research is that it doesn't have the same data requirements as like other like computer vision deep learning stuff, where it's like normally it's like, hey, we're Google, we spent $4 billion getting a data set for this topic, whereas with NeRFs, they're pretty much, I mean, I haven't seen, despite different approaches, but like most of them are based around, you train just on the object you're capturing, or object or space you're capturing.
Your data set is the video feed that you just took of this, or image you just took of this item. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if that in some sense, like, it's more democratized for people to work on, even because of that fact. And that's why there's just more, you don't need to spend tons of money. Like, anyone with a decent GPU could actually like experiment with this, which is pretty cool. I think
another thing that happened is NVIDIA came out with a project called Instant NGP or Instant NeRF that made it really easy for people to play with NeRF. I played with NeRF in 2020 when it first came out, and when I was training on a little scene, it would take hours, and then I would be rendering, and it would take 30 seconds or something per frame. Whereas with Instant NGP, it's like it trains the whole scene in like 10 seconds. I mean, to a reasonable level where you can start to explore it, and after a minute or two, it's really good, and then it renders almost essentially at kind of like at frame rate. So I think Instant NGP also changed the game in that it allowed lots of less academic people to play with NeRF.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, where do you where do you see it going? Like, what do you think? Like how do you think it gets used in VR, maybe AR? Like, like what are the different, like, if you were to sort of like look at it over the next like 5 years, this tech, and let's say even just specifically around VR, AR, how do you see it sort of evolving?
So, I think one way to think about it is that it'll kind of, one track anyway there'll be kind of an extension of some of the features that you started to see on like your phone. For example, you can maybe refocus a video a little bit after you shoot the video. With NeRF in a kind of constrained fashion, just generally, we're going to be able to start to edit our memories, our video memories in ways that we wouldn't have seen possible before. For example, we'll be able to change the viewpoint a little bit, look around the corner, pull back a little bit, zoom in, as the system starts to learn not just about the viewpoints that it can see currently, but it can start to do some cross-scene understanding and understand how something looks on the back. You'll be able to go crazy. You'll be able to look literally at something from behind. And so this is quite literally the beginning of what you've seen in movies for the last 50 years, which is like essentially hologram capture, right? So it's like hologram capture and playback.
But almost more so. I mean, think about the movie Strange Days. With they still needed the POV in that movie. They couldn't render stuff from angles they didn't have, and so in real life we've once again lapped science fiction.
Yeah, and I was watching exactly. Yeah, go ahead, Vikas.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
So I was watching, the latest season of Westworld, and they have the scene where Dolores is speaking like these narratives, and then they're showing these sort of like depth reconstructions that look like, you're feeding ideas into a deep network that's hallucinating the scene based on your textual description. But it's creating like a 3D scene. And I was looking at that and I was thinking like, that actually looks pretty terrible compared to what we can do now with NeRF. Like that wasn't photorealistic at all. So yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I think somebody at some point is probably going to figure out how to merge something like what's happening in the whole text to image mapping with DALL-E and others, where it's like there it's like this super high dimensional mapping between like you type out some words and it maps to a 2D image. But I can imagine like the true holodeck is really like marrying these two concepts. Like imagine you type or you just say like, show me put me inside of you're in a VR headset. You say, put me inside of a mid-century modern house in, Alaska or something. And it like renders out like this whole, like, almost like those same two concepts just like put together, and you could sort of describe. So it's like, yeah, you can imagine like, it's not really that many steps between where we are now and like something like the holodeck, perhaps, like where you could describe what you want to see. Yeah.
People are already using these, like GPT and various other tools to generate working code and like build functional applications. And so I think once you've got the computer spitting out code, it's a very short hop toward that code being 3D representations of the real world.
Yeah, you have to marry.
Yeah.
Oh, go, Jeff.
I mean, that's right. Like I'm shocked by what has started to work in these unsupervised learning systems that are able to do this generative stuff from text and translate from one language to any other language, even languages that going through languages that it didn't even have in the database and basically inferring its own machine version of language. Yeah, it's so weird to me. Like some of the things that I would have thought are the hardest things to do in AI are like done now.
They're just like working and nobody knows why too. Like a lot of these cases, people are like, well, it does this, but it really shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to be like the brain is something more than just like a bunch of matrix multiplications, because it's like everything is like, oh well, surely this has to be like something that's not possible by computers, and you're like, oh well, we added more multiplications and now it works, so maybe it's like
just needed three more levels of if statements and we've got a human brain now.
Well, I was watching Short Circuit, which is like, I actually still think to this day probably the largest number of like people in computer vision, robotics, like even startups or technology. Like that movie is, despite its bad ratings, is probably like one of the most influential movies of all time.
Unfortunate and notable example of brown face. We can't.
That is true. Yeah, that was one of the things that made me sad rewatching that. But the character on there, like, so Johnny Five is like, I was watching that movie and I'm like watching that with my like 4-year-old, and he's like, we're like looking at all the things it's doing, and I'm like, most of the things that it was doing in there were things that like you could arguably already do today. Like it wasn't like sci-fi really. It was like, okay, so it's like navigating around. It's like, okay, well, we have self-driving cars that are getting quite good. There's like text to speech generation, conversational stuff. Like actually, like in some sense, where he goes like need more input, and he like reads a whole textbook about whatever. It's kind of like what GPT-3 does, and you can like ask it questions, right? So it's kind of like almost everything. Like somebody should totally build a. What I'm saying, I guess, is basically maybe Jeff, you could maybe Arcturus could build Johnny 5.
G5.
That'd be fun. Let's do it. We'll just need a little funding. We'll just need a cool billion.
Just a small amount of money.
You just use like put them all together.
If we can find Mark Zuckerberg, we'll turn him upside down and shake him. Whatever falls out, it'll probably be enough.
Just will fall out real quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean NeRF. I mean to round up NeRF, to summarize it, like I think NeRF leads to the next the legit statement here is like, I do think it's maybe the next evolution in imagery, where we went from still photos to cave paintings, black and white to color photos to video to I think that's what's next. That's the 3D leap, is some variant on that, so that we're capturing the scene really in 3D and we're able to do it from any angle. And then we mix that up with all this other stuff, and you get kind of an extension of your imagination that is actually better than most people's real imaginations, which, then we get into whole other topics of what happens to creative fields and what happens to really every field. And for those of us who have kids that are a few years old, like, what should they even study? Like, at this point, I don't even know.
Yeah.
It's like, computer programming? No, probably not. Computer conversation? Maybe just talk to computers. I don't know what the future is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that is. Yeah, it's it'll be pretty exciting to see that evolve. I think like that was thanks so much, Jeff, for being on the LightTwist Show. It's been awesome to have you here. So many. We'll definitely have to have BF back on. So there's probably like 50 to 100 different stories that we've got from over the years that we didn't get to today.
Oh yeah, didn't even scratch the surface here. That's for sure.
Yeah, that sounds fun, guys. And I'm excited also to see LightTwist evolve and improve its capabilities and its realism and feature requests. I have many. I'll email you. But it's amazing platform, and keep it up.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, leave it. I will say Jeff is probably the only person I know, at least that I've met, that can pretty easily, with just pure eyesight, detect frames per second. And so, we'll have to say like, that's one of the things that we'll have to improve here is get up to that 60, maybe at least 30 solid, and then hopefully getting up into 60 down the road.
So that's about all we've got for episode 1. It was a lot of fun. Vikas, some last thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, it was super fun doing the first show ever for LightTwist with you, Phil. And really excited to have Jeff Powers on to talk about Structure Sensor, reminisce down memory lane for all the crazy things we did to bring that product online. And that's our show. Remember to take care of yourself and each other.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us at LightTwist app on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Wherever you are, have a great day. The LightTwist Show was not filmed before a live studio audience, nor will it ever be. Guests of the LightTwist Show were provided whatever accommodations they had at home. This broadcast may not be disseminated in whole or in part without the express written consent of Major League Baseball for reasons that are unclear to me.